The champagne glass slipped from my trembling fingers and shattered against the hardwood floor of my downtown Portland apartment. 28 candles flickered on my birthday cake as my younger sister Jessica stood in my living room, her hands dramatically placed over her still flat stomach, tears streaming down her face as she announced to our entire family that she was pregnant. But here's what nobody else knew: 3 weeks ago, I'd seen the text messages on her phone, the hotel receipts, the pregnancy test dated 2 months before she even married Ryan. My sister wasn't just stealing my birthday moment. She was carrying her own husband's child from an affair that started long before their wedding day. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Maya Thompson, and if you'd asked me 3 months ago to describe my life, I would have painted you a picture of controlled chaos wrapped in designer scarves and fueled by too much coffee. At 28, I was the marketing coordinator for Bright Ideas Marketing, one of Portland's fastest-growing creative agencies. My downtown loft apartment overlooked the Willamette River, and on clear days, I could see Mount Hood from my kitchen window while I made my morning espresso. I had worked 60-hour weeks for 3 years to afford that view, but it felt worth it every time I watched the sunrise paint the city in shades of gold and pink. I was the responsible one, the achiever, the sister who always had her life together. While Jessica bounced between yoga instructor jobs and artistic pursuits, I climbed the corporate ladder with methodical precision. I saved money, I planned ahead, and I always put family first. Growing up, after our parents divorced when I was 16 and Jessica was 13, I had naturally stepped into the role of protector and caretaker. Our mother Linda remarried within a year, and somehow in the chaos of blending families, Jessica became the baby who needed protecting, while I became the capable one who could handle anything. The pattern had continued into adulthood. When Jessica wanted to attend an expensive yoga teacher training program in Costa Rica, I covered half the cost. When she couldn't make rent because she'd spent her money on crystals and organic smoothie ingredients, I quietly transferred funds to her account. When she met Ryan at a wine tasting event and fell head over heels within 2 weeks, I helped plan their engagement party. And when they decided to have a destination wedding in Cabo despite having no savings, I worked overtime for 6 months to contribute to their dream celebration. Jessica was magnetic in the way that some people just are. She had long honey blonde hair that caught light like spun gold, green eyes that sparkled when she laughed, and this infectious energy that made everyone around her feel like they were part of something special. She collected people the way others collected seashells, and somehow everyone in her orbit felt grateful to be there. Our mother always said Jessica had a gift for bringing joy to others, and I suppose that was true. She certainly brought joy to Ryan Mitchell. I first met Ryan at Jessica's 24th birthday party last year. He was tall and broad-shouldered with dark hair and the kind of easy smile that made you trust him immediately. He worked in finance for a mid-sized investment firm, wore expensive watches, and had this way of making whoever he was talking to feel like the most interesting person in the room. When Jessica introduced him as her boyfriend, he shook my hand and said, "Maya, Jess talks about you constantly. She says you're the smartest person she knows." I'd felt a flutter of something, not attraction exactly, but appreciation for being seen. Over the months that followed, Ryan became part of our family ecosystem. He joined us for Sunday dinners at our childhood home in Beaverton, where our mother would fuss over him and ask about his work. He remembered details about my job and would ask thoughtful questions about marketing campaigns I was working on. He brought flowers for our mother and always insisted on helping with dishes. When he proposed to Jessica on Christmas morning, the diamond ring catching the light from our mother's tree, I'd felt genuine happiness for my sister. She deserved someone who adored her, and Ryan clearly did. The wedding planning consumed Jessica's life for 6 months. She called me multiple times a day with updates about flowers, venues, and dress fittings. She changed her mind about color schemes 3 times and went through 2 different wedding planners before settling on a third. Through it all, Ryan remained patient and supportive, agreeing to whatever made Jessica happy. I helped wherever I could, from addressing invitations to coordinating with vendors, even though my own life was busier than ever. At work, we'd recently hired a new graphic designer named David Chen. He was quiet and thoughtful, with dark hair that fell across his forehead when he concentrated and a way of listening that made you feel heard. David had moved to Portland from San Francisco, drawn by the city's creative energy and lower cost of living. He worked at the desk next to mine, and I found myself looking forward to our morning conversations over coffee. He had this dry sense of humor that caught me off guard and made me laugh at unexpected moments. David noticed things others missed. When I was stressed about a particularly difficult client, he'd quietly leave a chocolate croissant from the bakery downstairs on my desk. When I stayed late working on presentations, he'd offer to help with design elements without being asked. We'd started grabbing lunch together a few times a week, talking about everything from Portland's food scene to our shared love of hiking. There was something easy about being around David, something that made me feel like I could be myself without performing or managing anyone else's emotions. But family always came first, and Jessica's wedding was the priority. The ceremony in Cabo was beautiful, with white flowers and ocean views, and Jessica glowing in a dress that cost more than my monthly rent. Ryan's vows made everyone cry, including me. He promised to love Jessica through all of life's adventures, to support her dreams, and to build a future filled with laughter and joy. Jessica's vows were equally romantic, full of promises about growing old together and creating a love story worth telling their children someday. The first few months of their marriage seemed blissful. Jessica posted constantly on social media about date nights and weekend getaways. Ryan appeared in her Instagram stories bringing her surprise lunches and flowers for no reason. They moved into a cute craftsman house in the Alberta district, and Jessica threw herself into decorating with the same intensity she'd brought to wedding planning. She hosted dinner parties and yoga sessions in their living room, creating the kind of warm, welcoming home that made everyone want to be invited. I was genuinely happy for them, even as I sometimes felt a pang of loneliness watching their obvious contentment. My own romantic life had been a series of disappointing dates and relationships that never quite took hold. I threw myself into work instead, earning recognition for successful campaigns and building a reputation as someone who could handle the agency's most challenging clients. My boss, Mr. Peterson, had started hinting about a promotion to senior coordinator, with the possibility of managing my own team within the year. The first crack in Jessica and Ryan's perfect facade appeared 3 months ago, though I didn't recognize it as significant at the time. Jessica had seemed more emotionally volatile than usual, crying over minor inconveniences and snapping at family dinners. When I asked if everything was okay, she blamed it on work stress and wedding debt. Ryan seemed more distant too, checking his phone constantly and leaving early from family gatherings. But newlywed adjustments were normal, I told myself. Every couple went through periods of figuring things out. It was a random Tuesday evening when I discovered the truth, and it happened in the most mundane way possible. Jessica had stopped by my apartment to borrow a black dress for a work event, and she'd left her phone on my kitchen counter when she went to the bathroom. When it buzzed with a text message, I glanced over automatically, the way you do when a sound draws your attention. The preview showed a message from someone named R with a heart emoji. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Missing you already? My stomach dropped. R with a heart emoji could only be Ryan, but why would he be texting Jessica like that when they lived together? The phone buzzed again. Delete these after you read them. Don't want any accidents. Jessica emerged from the bathroom, chattering about her coworker's drama, and I handed her the phone without saying anything. But that night, I couldn't sleep. The messages replayed in my mind, and I found myself analyzing every interaction I'd witnessed between Jessica and Ryan over the past few months. The way they'd seemed careful around each other at family dinners. How Jessica had been secretive about her schedule lately. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The fact that Ryan had started showing up to things separately, claiming work conflicts. 2 weeks later, Jessica left her phone unlocked on my coffee table while she ran downstairs to get something from her car. I told myself I was being paranoid. That I was seeing problems where none existed, but my hands moved before my mind could stop them. I opened her text messages and found months of correspondence with our hotel reservations. Photos that made my face burn with embarrassment and horror. And scattered among the explicit messages, conversations about timing and planning and keeping secrets. The pregnancy test photo was dated 6 weeks ago, 2 months after Jessica's wedding, but confirming what the message thread had already told me. Jessica had been having an affair with Ryan since before their engagement, continuing through their wedding planning and into their marriage. The baby she was carrying had been conceived during one of their secret meetings, while she was lying to everyone about her perfect newlywed life. I sat in my living room for 2 hours that night, phone in my trembling hands, trying to process what I discovered. My sister, who I'd protected and supported and sacrificed for my entire life, was living a complete lie. She was cheating on her husband with someone else, carrying another man's child, and letting everyone believe in her fairy tale marriage. But who was R? The messages were careful never to use full names, only initials and coded language. It took another week of subtle investigation before I figured it out. I started paying closer attention to Jessica's schedule, cross-referencing her social media posts with her actual whereabouts. I noticed patterns in when she claimed to be teaching yoga classes that didn't exist and when she said she was having girls' nights that none of her friends mentioned. The pieces came together slowly, but when they did, the picture was devastating. R wasn't some mysterious stranger. R was Robert Harrison, Jessica's yoga studio manager, a married man with 2 young children. I'd met him at Jessica's work events, where he'd seemed professional and devoted to his family. His wife Sarah was a nurse who sometimes brought their kids to the studio for family yoga sessions. Looking at his social media, I could see the same careful patterns Jessica exhibited: unexplained absences, vague posts about work commitments, and a gradual decrease in family photos over the past 6 months. The betrayal felt layered and complex in a way that made my chest ache. Jessica wasn't just cheating on Ryan, though that was horrible enough. She was participating in the destruction of Robert's marriage and family. She was lying to everyone who loved her, including me. And she was planning to raise this child as Ryan's, letting him fall in love with and financially support a baby that wasn't his. I spent sleepless nights wondering what to do with this information. Should I confront Jessica directly? Tell Ryan what I discovered? Contact Robert's wife? Every option felt like it would explode our family and hurt innocent people. Ryan didn't deserve to be deceived, but he also didn't deserve to have his world destroyed. Robert's children didn't deserve to lose their father to their mother's pain and anger. Our mother, who adored Jessica and had been so proud of her successful marriage, would be devastated. I tried to convince myself that maybe I was wrong, that there was some explanation I wasn't seeing. But the evidence was overwhelming and getting stronger every day. Jessica's behavior became more erratic as her pregnancy progressed. She called in sick to work more frequently, claimed she was having terrible morning sickness, and started avoiding alcohol at family dinners. She and Ryan seemed to be getting along better, which made sense if she was preparing to pass off another man's child as his. The final confirmation came 2 weeks ago when I saw Jessica and Robert together at a coffee shop across town. I'd been running errands in that neighborhood and stopped for a latte when I spotted them through the window. They were sitting close together at a corner table, Jessica's hand on her stomach while Robert leaned in to kiss her forehead. The intimacy between them was unmistakable, and when they left together, Robert's hand was protectively placed on the small of Jessica's back. That night, I made a decision that felt both inevitable and terrifying. I was going to tell Ryan the truth, but I needed to be strategic about when and how. I couldn't let him fall deeper in love with a child that wasn't his, but I also needed to protect myself from the fallout that would inevitably follow. Jessica would never forgive me for exposing her secret, and our family would likely side with her as they always had. I needed to be prepared for the possibility that I might lose everyone I cared about. My 28th birthday was supposed to be a celebration of everything good in my life. I'd planned a small dinner party at my apartment with close family and a few friends from work. David had offered to help with decorations, and I'd been looking forward to an evening of good food, wine, and laughter. I'd even splurged on a custom cake from my favorite bakery, decorated with edible flowers and gold leaf. It was going to be elegant and intimate, exactly the kind of celebration I'd wanted. Jessica had seemed unusually excited about the party, offering to help with preparations and insisting on bringing special appetizers. She'd hugged me extra tight when she arrived that evening, telling me how much she loved me and how proud she was to be my sister. Ryan had brought an expensive bottle of champagne and a beautiful jewelry box he'd obviously spent time selecting. Our mother had given me a cashmere scarf in my favorite shade of blue, and even our stepfather had remembered to bring flowers. David had stayed late at the office to finish a design project for my birthday cake presentation, creating a digital photo slideshow of my favorite Portland memories. Sarah had driven over from her new house in Selwood, bringing homemade cookies and stories about her recent promotion. Amanda from work had surprised me with a beautiful succulent arrangement for my kitchen windowsill. The apartment was filled with warmth and conversation and the kind of contentment that comes from being surrounded by people who genuinely care about you. We were just about to cut the cake when Jessica stood up, tapping her wine glass with a fork to get everyone's attention. She'd been drinking sparkling water all evening, which I'd noticed but attributed to her trying to be health conscious. Her cheeks were flushed with excitement, and she had that particular glow that came over her when she was about to be the center of attention. "I have an announcement to make," she said, her voice carrying across my living room. I wanted to wait until we were all together, because family is so important to me, and Maya's birthday seemed like the perfect time to share our wonderful news. My stomach clenched with dread even before she continued speaking. I could see Ryan's confused expression from across the room, the way his brow furrowed as he tried to figure out what Jessica was about to announce. Our mother leaned forward eagerly, always ready to celebrate whatever Jessica had to share. "Ryan and I are going to have a baby." Jessica's voice broke with emotion as she placed both hands over her stomach. "We're 12 weeks along, and we just couldn't keep it secret any longer." The room erupted in congratulations and excitement. Our mother burst into tears and rushed to hug Jessica, already talking about grandchildren and baby showers and nursery decorating. Ryan looked stunned for a moment before his face broke into a wide smile, and he moved to wrap his arms around Jessica from behind, his hands covering hers on her stomach. Sarah squealed with delight and started asking about due dates and morning sickness. David smiled politely and offered his congratulations, though I could see him watching my reaction with concern. I stood frozen in the middle of my own living room, watching my birthday celebration transform into a baby announcement party. The champagne flute slipped from my numb fingers and shattered against the floor, the sound sharp and final in the suddenly charged atmosphere. Everyone turned to look at me, concern replacing celebration as they took in my white face and trembling hands. Maya, are you okay? David was beside me immediately, his warm hand on my shoulder, his voice gentle and worried. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe properly. I watched Jessica accept hugs and congratulations, watched Ryan beam with pride as he talked about becoming a father, watched our mother plan a future built on lies and deception. The baby Jessica was carrying had been conceived in a hotel room with another woman's husband while Ryan worked late at the office, believing his wife was teaching yoga classes that didn't exist. I'm fine, I managed to whisper, though my voice sounded strange and distant even to my own ears. Just surprised. Congratulations. But I wasn't fine, and I wouldn't be fine until the truth came out. As I watched my family celebrate Jessica's pregnancy, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to let Ryan fall in love with another man's child. I wasn't going to let Robert's wife continue living in ignorance while her husband destroyed their family. And I wasn't going to protect Jessica from the consequences of her choices anymore. The champagne glass lay in pieces on my hardwood floor, reflecting the birthday candles like scattered stars. In 12 hours, I would call Ryan and ask him to meet me for coffee. I would show him the screenshots I'd taken of Jessica's messages, the hotel receipts, the pregnancy timeline that didn't match their marriage. I would watch his world crumble and help him pick up the pieces. But first, I had to get through the rest of my birthday party, smiling and nodding while everyone planned a future that was built on the biggest lie my family had ever told. The morning sun streamed through my apartment windows, casting harsh light on the remnants of last night's celebration. Empty wine glasses sat abandoned on my coffee table, and wilted flower petals from the centerpiece had scattered across the hardwood floor where my champagne glass had shattered. I swept up the glass fragments slowly, each piece catching the light like tiny daggers, while my phone buzzed incessantly with family group chat messages about Jessica's pregnancy. My mother had started a new thread called Baby Thompson Mitchell Updates and was already sending links to cribs and stroller reviews. Jessica was responding with heart emojis and excited commentary about nursery themes, while Ryan contributed practical questions about insurance coverage and pediatrician recommendations. Reading their messages felt like watching a play where I was the only audience member who knew the script was completely wrong. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night staring at my ceiling and rehearsing different versions of the conversation I needed to have with Ryan. How do you tell someone that their entire reality is built on deception? How do you destroy a man's happiness while simultaneously trying to save him from a larger betrayal? Every approach I considered seemed cruel, but staying silent felt even crueler. David had texted me around midnight, a simple message that said, "Hope you're okay. Yesterday seemed overwhelming. Coffee tomorrow if you want to talk." His thoughtfulness made my chest ache with gratitude. In a world where everyone seemed to be performing their relationships for social media, David's quiet consistency felt like an anchor. I called Ryan at 9 in the morning, my hands trembling as I dialed his number. He answered on the second ring, his voice bright with post-announcement euphoria. "Maya, can you believe it? I'm going to be a dad." His excitement was genuine and devastating. Jess is already making lists of baby names. We were thinking maybe we could do a little family celebration this weekend, just us and your mom. What do you think? My throat felt tight and scratchy. "Ryan, I need to talk to you about something important. Can you meet me for coffee this morning?" Without Jessica. There was a pause, and when he spoke again, his tone had shifted slightly. "Is everything okay? You seemed a little off last night after the announcement." "Everything's not okay," I said quietly. "But I can't explain over the phone. Can you meet me at Grind Coffee House on Burnside in an hour?" "Of course. Maya, you're scaring me a little. Is there something wrong with the baby? Just meet me there, Ryan. Please." I spent the drive to the coffee shop practicing my opening lines, but nothing sounded right. How do you begin a conversation that will end with someone's world completely falling apart? I arrived early and chose a corner table away from other customers, my laptop bag containing printed screenshots and a timeline I'd compiled documenting Jessica's affair. Ryan walked in exactly on time, scanning the coffee shop until he spotted me. He looked tired, I realized, in a way I hadn't noticed the night before. There were dark circles under his eyes, and his usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled. He ordered a large black coffee and sat across from me, his expression shifting from concern to something approaching dread. "Maya, what's going on? You look like someone died." I pulled out my phone and opened the first screenshot I'd saved. A text conversation between Jessica and R from 2 weeks ago. Without saying anything, I slid the phone across the table. Ryan picked it up, his eyes scanning the messages, and I watched his face change as he processed what he was reading. "Who is R?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "Robert Harrison. Jessica's manager at the yoga studio." Ryan's face went completely white. He scrolled through more messages, his hands starting to shake. "These timestamps. Maya, what is this?" I pulled out the printed documents I'd prepared, laying them on the table between us like evidence in a court case. Hotel receipts dating back 6 months. Restaurant charges on days when Jessica claimed to be working late. Photos from Robert's social media showing him at locations Jessica had posted about on the same days, always careful not to tag each other but clearly together. "Jessica has been having an affair with Robert since before your wedding," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "The baby she's carrying isn't yours, Ryan. The conception date puts it right in the middle of their relationship, not yours." Ryan stared at the evidence spread across our table, his coffee growing cold as he processed each document. I watched him connect the dots, saw the exact moment when everything clicked into place. His face crumpled, and he put his head in his hands. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice muffled. 3 weeks. I discovered it by accident when she left her phone unlocked at my apartment. 3 weeks. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed. "You've known for 3 weeks, and you let me stand there last night talking about becoming a father." I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't want to believe it myself. Ryan laughed, but it was a broken sound with no humor in it. "Robert Harrison. I've met him. Nice guy, seemed devoted to his family. Guess we were both wrong about that." We sat in silence for several minutes while Ryan went through the evidence again, as if hoping it might change on second viewing. Other coffee shop customers chatted and laughed around us, their normal Tuesday morning routines continuing while Ryan's life imploded at our corner table. "Does his wife know?" Ryan finally asked. "I don't think so. Sarah seems as clueless as you were." "Sarah." Ryan closed his eyes. "Their kids are in elementary school. This is going to destroy them too. I'm sorry, Ryan. I'm so sorry I had to be the one to tell you this." He shook his head. "Don't apologize. You saved me from something much worse. Can you imagine if I'd found out after the baby was born? After I'd fallen in love with a child that wasn't mine?" "What are you going to do?" Ryan gathered the documents into a neat pile, his movements precise and controlled. "I'm going to confront her. Today. And then I'm going to call my lawyer." "And the baby?" "The baby deserves to know who their real father is. And Robert's wife deserves to know what her husband has been doing." Ryan stood up, looking older than his 30 years. "Maya, I need you to know that I don't blame you for any of this. Jessica made these choices, not you. I feel like I should have told you sooner. You told me when you were ready. That took courage." He paused at our table, one hand resting on the back of his chair. "Can I ask you something?" "Why now? Why did you decide to tell me after Jessica's announcement last night?" I thought about his question, remembering the moment when my champagne glass had slipped from my fingers. "Because watching everyone celebrate this pregnancy, seeing how happy you looked, I realized I couldn't let you build your future on a lie. You deserve better than that." Ryan nodded slowly. "Thank you for caring enough about me to risk your relationship with your family." After he left, I sat alone at our table for another hour, staring at my untouched latte and trying to process what I'd just done. I'd essentially ended my sister's marriage and probably destroyed any chance of a normal relationship with my family. My phone had been buzzing with messages all morning, but I hadn't looked at any of them. I wasn't ready to face the world Jessica had created with her lies and manipulations. David texted around noon, "Still up for that coffee? You look like you could use a friend right now." I looked up to see him standing in the coffee shop doorway, having apparently spotted me through the window during his lunch break. He was wearing a navy blue sweater that brought out his eyes, and his concerned expression made something tight in my chest loosen slightly. "How did you know I was here?" I asked as he sat in the chair Ryan had vacated. "Lucky guess. You mentioned this place was your favorite for thinking." He studied my face carefully. "You look like you've been through something intense." "I just had the worst conversation of my life." David signaled the barista for another coffee and settled back in his chair. "Want to talk about it?" I found myself telling him everything. About discovering Jessica's affair, about the pregnancy that wasn't Ryan's, about the evidence I'd just shared that would destroy my sister's marriage. David listened without judgment, asking clarifying questions and offering tissues when my voice broke. That must have been incredibly difficult, he said when I finished. Choosing between protecting your sister and protecting Ryan. I don't know if I made the right choice. You made the only choice someone with integrity could make. Ryan deserved to know the truth. My family is going to hate me. David reached across the table and covered my hand with his. Maya, people who truly love you don't ask you to keep secrets that hurt innocent people. If your family can't understand why you did this, that says more about them than it does about you. His words hit something deep in my chest, a recognition I wasn't quite ready to acknowledge. For my entire adult life, I'd prioritized family harmony over my own moral compass, covering for Jessica's mistakes and enabling her selfish behavior. Maybe it was time to stop. What happens now? I asked. Now you go home, and you wait. Ryan will handle his conversation with Jessica, and you'll deal with whatever comes next. But you don't have to deal with it alone. David's phone buzzed with a work message, reminding us both that the outside world was still functioning normally. I should get back to the office, he said reluctantly. But Maya, call me tonight, okay? Whatever happens with your family, you shouldn't go through it by yourself. Walking back to my apartment, I felt like I was moving through a dream. Everything looked the same, the familiar streets of my neighborhood, the coffee shops and boutiques I passed regularly, the tree-lined sidewalks where I'd walked countless times before. But something fundamental had shifted. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross, made a choice that would change everything. My phone had accumulated dozens of messages while I was with David. Most were from the family group chat, continued excitement about Jessica's pregnancy. But there were several missed calls from Jessica herself, and one text message that made my stomach drop. Maya, I need to talk to you. Something terrible has happened. Part 3, the confrontation unleashed. Jessica was waiting in my apartment lobby when I returned from the coffee shop, her face streaked with tears and her usually perfect hair hanging in disheveled waves around her shoulders. She looked smaller somehow, diminished in a way I'd never seen before. The confident, radiant woman who had announced her pregnancy just 12 hours earlier was gone, replaced by someone who looked frightened and desperate. How could you do this to me? She said as soon as I walked through the lobby doors. Her voice was raw from crying, and several other residents turned to stare at us. How could you destroy my marriage? I didn't respond, just gestured toward the elevator. We rode up to my floor in tense silence, Jessica sniffling and me trying to prepare myself for the confrontation I'd known was coming. Inside my apartment, she immediately began pacing my living room like a caged animal, her movements sharp and agitated. Ryan came home 2 hours ago with a stack of papers, she said, her voice rising with each word. Pictures of text messages, hotel receipts, restaurant bills. He knows everything, Maya. Everything. Good, I said quietly, setting my purse down on the kitchen counter. He deserved to know. Jessica whirled around to face me, her green eyes flashing with anger. You had no right. No right to interfere in my marriage. Your marriage? I felt my own anger starting to build, hot and fierce in my chest. Jessica, you've been cheating on your husband since before your wedding. You're carrying another man's child and planning to let Ryan raise it as his own. What part of that is a marriage worth protecting? You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me. I crossed my arms and waited. Explain how having an affair with a married father of 2 is something I should have kept secret. Jessica's face crumpled, and she sank onto my couch, her hands covering her face. It's not that simple, Maya. Robert and I, we fell in love. Real love, not like what I had with Ryan. So you decided to have your cake and eat it too? Keep Ryan for financial security while having your real relationship on the side? It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Jessica's voice was muffled by her hands. Robert was going to leave Sarah after their youngest started middle school. We had a plan. A plan that involved lying to everyone who cared about you. A plan that didn't involve my sister betraying me. Jessica looked up, her face red and blotchy from crying. I trusted you, Maya. I thought you loved me. I do love you. That's why I've spent my entire adult life cleaning up your messes and covering for your mistakes. But I won't help you destroy innocent people's lives. Jessica stood up abruptly, her sadness transforming back into anger. Innocent people? Ryan isn't innocent. He's boring and predictable and safe. He never understood me the way Robert does. Then you should have broken up with him before the wedding instead of lying to him for months. I couldn't. Don't you see? Mom was so excited about the wedding, and everyone expected us to be perfect. Ryan's a good guy, and he would have been a good father. To a child that isn't his. He would have loved the baby anyway. Ryan's the kind of man who would have been devoted regardless. I stared at my sister, this person I'd protected, and supported my entire life, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. Listen to yourself, Jessica. You're talking about Ryan like he's a convenient accessory to your life, not a human being with feelings and rights. You wouldn't understand, Jessica said, her tone turning dismissive. You've never been in love. The way I am with Robert. You don't know what it's like to feel that kind of connection with someone. Her words hit like a slap, bringing up years of feeling overlooked and undervalued. You're right, I don't understand. I don't understand how someone can claim to love two different men while lying to both of them. I don't understand how you can sleep peacefully knowing you're destroying multiple families. I'm not destroying anything. I'm trying to find happiness. At everyone else's expense. My voice was louder than I'd intended, months of suppressed frustration finally erupting. Do you have any idea what this is going to do to Robert's children? They're going to lose their family because their father couldn't keep his promises. Jessica's face went pale. Robert's children will be fine. Kids are resilient. Kids are resilient? Jessica, you're talking about two elementary school students who are about to watch their parents divorce because their father had an affair with their mother's friend. Sarah was never my friend. She trusted you enough to bring her children to your yoga classes. She included you in family events because she thought you were a safe person. Jessica began pacing again, her movements becoming more frantic. You don't know anything about Sarah and Robert's marriage. It was already falling apart. I didn't cause their problems. But you certainly made them worse. Their marriage was over anyway. According to who? Robert? I felt a bitter laugh escape my throat. Jessica, cheating husbands have been telling their mistresses that their marriages are over since the beginning of time. It's the oldest lie in the book. It's not a lie. Robert really loves me. Robert loves having a young, beautiful woman who thinks he's amazing while his wife is home dealing with the reality of raising his children and managing their household. Jessica stopped pacing and turned to face me, her expression shifting to something I'd never seen before, cold calculation mixed with desperation. You're just jealous, she said, her voice suddenly calm and cutting. You're jealous because I found real love and you're still alone. Alone? I felt my eyebrows rise. Jessica, I'm alone because I've spent the last 10 years of my life managing your drama instead of focusing on my own relationships. Nobody forced you to do that. You're right. Nobody forced me. I chose to prioritize your happiness over my own, and that was my mistake. But I'm done making that choice. What does that mean? I walked to my kitchen and poured myself a glass of water, taking a moment to compose my thoughts. When I turned back to Jessica, she was watching me with wary eyes. It means I'm not going to cover for you anymore, I said. I'm not going to lie to Mom about why your marriage is falling apart. I'm not going to make excuses for your behavior. And I'm not going to pretend that what you did to Ryan and Robert's family is acceptable. You're going to tell Mom what really happened? I'm going to tell her the truth if she asks me directly. I'm done participating in your web of lies. Jessica's composure finally cracked completely. She sank back onto my couch and began sobbing, her entire body shaking with the force of her tears. Maya, please. You're my sister. You're supposed to protect me. I've been protecting you our entire lives, and look where it got us. You never learned to face consequences because I was always there to soften the blow. I'm pregnant. I'm scared and confused and I need my family. You should have thought about that before you decided to have an affair with a married man. The baby didn't ask for any of this. For the first time since discovering Jessica's deception, I felt a genuine pang of sympathy. She was right, the innocent child she was carrying didn't deserve to be born into such chaos. But that didn't change the fundamental facts of the situation. You're right, I said, sitting down across from her. The baby is innocent. Which is exactly why Robert needs to know he's going to be a father, and why Ryan needs to know the child isn't his. Robert already knows about the baby. And what did he say? Jessica wiped her nose with the back of her hand, looking younger than her 25 years. He said he needs time to figure things out. That telling Sarah right now would be too traumatic for the kids. Let me guess, he wants to wait until after the holidays? Or maybe until the school year ends? Or perhaps until the kids are in college? You don't have to be so cruel about it. I'm being realistic. Jessica, Robert is a married man with responsibilities. The longer he waits to tell his wife the truth, the harder it's going to be for everyone involved. Maybe he'll change his mind. Maybe he'll realize that we're worth fighting for. I studied my sister's face, seeing the desperate hope there, and felt something inside me break a little more. Jessica, even if Robert leaves his family for you, is that really the foundation you want for your relationship? Knowing that he abandoned his children to be with you? He wouldn't be abandoning them. He'd still be their father. Children of divorce don't see it that way, especially When the divorce happens because of an affair. Jessica stood up abruptly, wiping her face and straightening her clothes. You know what, Maya? I don't have to listen to this. I came here hoping my sister would support me through the worst day of my life, but instead you're lecturing me. Like you're my mother. Support you through what? The consequences of your own choices? Support me through losing my marriage and possibly losing the man I love. You lost your marriage the day you decided to cheat on your husband. And if Robert was really the man you think he is, he would have left his wife before starting anything with you. Jessica walked toward my door, then turned back one last time. I hope you're happy, Maya. I hope destroying my life was worth whatever moral superiority you think you've gained. I didn't destroy your life, Jessica. I just stopped helping you destroy other people's. After she left, I sat alone in my apartment surrounded by the lingering tension of our confrontation. My phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. It's done. I told her to pack her things and stay somewhere else tonight. Thank you for giving me the strength to do what needed to be done. Then another message from David. How are you holding up? Still want company tonight? I typed back quickly. Yes, please. Bring wine. Part 4. Family fractures. My mother arrived at my apartment the next morning without calling first, something she'd never done in all the years I'd lived there. I heard her voice in the lobby through my building's intercom system, tight with anger and barely controlled emotion, demanding to be let upstairs immediately. I buzzed her in and waited by my door, knowing that whatever conversation was about to happen would probably end our relationship as I'd known it for the past 28 years. Linda Thompson burst through my doorway like a hurricane, her usually immaculate appearance disheveled and her eyes red from crying. She was still wearing her pajama pants under her winter coat, which told me she'd driven over in a state of complete emotional chaos. Behind her stood my stepfather Mark, looking uncomfortable and apologetic, clearly having been dragged along for moral support. How could you do this to your sister? Mom's voice was shaking with fury. How could you destroy her marriage over jealousy and spite? I closed the door carefully and turned to face them, keeping my voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through my system. I'm not jealous of Jessica, Mom. I exposed her affair because Ryan deserved to know the truth. What truth? That Jessica made a mistake? That she's human and fallible like the rest of us? That she's been cheating on her husband for months. And is pregnant with another man's child. Mom flinched as if I'd struck her. You don't know that for certain. Pregnancies can be complicated, timing can be confusing. I walked to my kitchen table where I'd left copies of the evidence I'd shown Ryan, picking up the timeline I'd created documenting Jessica's affair. Mom, I have text messages, hotel receipts, and photo evidence covering 6 months of Jessica's relationship with Robert Harrison. The pregnancy timing matches their affair, not her marriage. I don't want to see those things. Mom turned away from the papers I was holding. Whatever mistakes Jessica may have made, she's still your sister. Family protects family, Maya. That's what we do. Even when family is wrong? Especially when family is wrong. That's when they need us most. Mark stepped forward, his voice gentle but firm. Maya, your mother is devastated. Jessica called her at 5 this morning, crying and homeless. She's staying in a hotel because Ryan kicked her out. Ryan didn't kick her out because I told him the truth, I said. Ryan asked her to leave because she's been lying to him for months. You could have talked to Jessica first, Mom said, her voice breaking. You could have given her a chance to end the affair and save her marriage. She's had months to end the affair, Mom. She chose not to. People make mistakes, Maya. People fall in love with the wrong person sometimes. That doesn't mean you destroy their entire life. I felt my patience beginning to fray around the edges. What about Ryan's life? What about Robert's wife and children? Don't they matter at all? Of course they matter, but they're not my daughter. Neither is Ryan, but he's been part of our family for over a year. He trusted us, he cared about us, and Jessica was planning to let him raise another man's child. Mom walked to my living room window, staring out at the city while she composed herself. When she turned back around, her expression had shifted from anger to something that looked almost like disgust. You've always been jealous of Jessica, she said quietly. Even when you were children, you resented how easily things came to her. Mom, this has nothing to do with childhood jealousy, doesn't it? Jessica is beautiful and charismatic and people love her. You've always had to work harder for attention, and I think part of you enjoyed being the one to knock her down. Her words hit like physical blows, dredging up decades of feeling like the less favored daughter. You think I destroyed Jessica's marriage because I'm jealous of her? I think you saw an opportunity to be the good daughter for once, and you took it regardless of the cost. Mark shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. Linda, maybe we should. No, Mark. This needs to be said. Mom's eyes were fixed on my face, and I could see years of accumulated resentment there. Maya has always thought she was better than Jessica because she made different choices. More responsible choices. But responsibility without compassion is just self-righteousness. Self-righteousness? I felt my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Mom, I spent my entire adult life covering for Jessica's mistakes. I paid for her yoga training, I helped with her wedding, I made excuses. When she was irresponsible. How is that self-righteous? Because you did all of those things to make yourself feel superior. You loved being the reliable one, the one everyone could count on. It made you feel important. It made me feel useful. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you finally found something you couldn't fix for Jessica, so you decided to destroy it instead. I stared at my mother, this woman who had raised me and supposedly loved me, and felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. She was choosing Jessica over me, just like she always had, but this time she was doing it by questioning my motives and my character. You think I told Ryan about the affair because I wanted to hurt Jessica? I think you told Ryan because you've spent your whole life in Jessica's shadow, and this was your chance to be the hero of the story. The hero? I laughed, but it was a bitter sound. Mom, there are no heroes in this story. There are just people trying to deal with the mess Jessica created. Jessica is 25 years old. She's allowed to make mistakes. She's 25 years old and married. Her mistakes have consequences for other people. Mom picked up her purse from where she dropped it by the door, her movements sharp and decisive. I can see there's no reasoning with you. You've made your choice, and now you'll have to live with it. What does that mean? It means Jessica is family, and you've chosen to hurt her. So you'll have to decide what's more important to you, your moral superiority or your relationship with your sister. Mom, Jessica chose to have an affair. Jessica chose to lie to her husband. Jessica chose to get pregnant by another man. I didn't make any of those choices for her. But you chose to expose her instead of helping her fix the situation. There was no fixing this situation. Ryan deserved to know the truth. Ryan. Mom's voice was rising to near shouting levels. What about your loyalty to your own family? What about my loyalty to basic human decency? Mom opened my door and paused in the doorway, Mark hovering behind her with an apologetic expression. Jessica needs somewhere to stay while she figures out her next steps. Since you're so concerned about everyone else's welfare, I'm sure you won't mind if she moves back into her childhood bedroom temporarily. Of course not. She's your daughter. Yes, she is. And apparently that means more to me than it does to you. After they left, I sat on my couch in the deafening silence of my apartment and cried for the first time since this whole situation began. Not delicate tears, but ugly, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere deep in my chest. I cried for the family relationships I'd probably just lost forever. I cried for Ryan and his shattered trust. I cried for Robert's children, who would soon learn that their father had been living a double life. And I cried for the version of myself who had believed that doing the right thing would somehow feel better than this. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, Ryan's sister, whom I'd met several times at family gatherings. Maya, Ryan told me what you did. Thank you for caring enough about my brother to tell him the truth. I know it couldn't have been easy. Then another message from Amanda at work. Girl, the office grapevine is saying you're going through something intense. Want to grab lunch? Today? No judgment, just friendship. And finally, David, thinking about you. No, today is probably rough. Here if you need anything at all. I realized that while I might be losing the family I'd grown up with, I wasn't actually alone. There were people in my life who valued honesty and integrity, who understood that sometimes doing the right thing meant making difficult choices. Maybe it was time to stop prioritizing relationships that required me to compromise my values and start investing in connections with people who respected my moral compass. I called David back and asked if he wanted to meet for lunch. Not because I needed someone to fix my problems, but because I wanted to spend time with someone who understood that relationships should be built on truth rather than convenient lies. Absolutely, he said. But Maya, are you okay? You sound like you've been crying. I have been crying. But I think I'm okay. Or at least, I'm going to be okay. That's all any of us can ask for. Part 5, breaking free from expectations. The marketing agency buzzed with its usual midweek energy when I arrived at work the next day, but I felt like I was moving through the familiar space in a protective bubble. Amanda greeted me with concerned eyes and an extra-large coffee, while several other coworkers offered sympathetic smiles without prying into details. Word had apparently spread that I was dealing with family drama, though thankfully the specifics hadn't made it through the office grapevine. David was at his desk when I reached my workspace, and he looked up from his computer screen with genuine relief when he saw me. "How are you holding up?" he asked quietly, mindful of our open office environment. "I've been better," I admitted, settling into my chair and powering up my computer. "But I think I made the right choice, even if it doesn't feel good right now." The right choices rarely feel good in the moment. That's what makes them difficult. Mr. Peterson emerged from his office around 10 o'clock and approached my desk with the kind of expression that usually preceded important conversations. "Maya, could I see you in my office for a few minutes?" I followed him into the glass-walled space that overlooked our creative bullpen, wondering if somehow my personal drama had affected my professional reputation. Mr. Peterson was a fair man in his 50s who had built the agency from nothing over the past decade, and I respected both his business acumen and his leadership style. "I wanted to talk to you about the Henderson Group campaign," he said, settling behind his desk with a thick folder. "The client was extremely impressed with your presentation last week, and they've specifically requested that you lead the account moving forward." I blinked in surprise. The Henderson Group was one of our biggest clients, a property development company that managed luxury residential projects throughout the Pacific Northwest. Leading their account would mean a significant increase in responsibility and visibility within the agency. "I'm honored that they requested me specifically," I said, still processing the unexpected news. "You should be. It's a testament to the quality of work you've been producing." Mr. Peterson leaned back in his chair and studied my face. "Maya, I've been watching your growth over the past 3 years, and I think you're ready for the next level. How would you feel about taking on the senior coordinator position we discussed? It would mean managing your own team and having more autonomy over client relationships." The promotion I'd been working toward for months was suddenly being offered, at a time when everything else in my life was falling apart. It felt surreal, like the universe was reminding me that I had value and purpose beyond the family relationships that had defined so much of my identity. "I would love that opportunity," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "Excellent. We'll make it official next week, but I wanted to give you time to think about how you'd like to structure your team. You'll have the budget for 2 junior coordinators and a dedicated graphic designer." Walking back to my desk, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks: genuine excitement about my future. The promotion would mean more money, more creative control, and the opportunity to build something meaningful in my professional life. It would also provide a healthy distraction from the ongoing family drama. David looked up expectantly as I approached our shared workspace. "Good news or bad news?" he asked, reading my expression. "Good news, actually. I just got promoted to senior coordinator." His face broke into a wide smile. "Maya, that's incredible. Congratulations." Then, more quietly, "You deserve this. You've been carrying this agency's client relationships for years." "Thank you. And David, I'd like you to be the dedicated graphic designer for my team, if you're interested." His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Really? You want to work with me more closely?" "I want to work with people I trust. People who have integrity and talent." "Then yes, absolutely. I'd be honored to be part of your team." The rest of the morning passed quickly as I threw myself into planning for the Henderson Group campaign and thinking about team structure for my new role. It felt good to focus on problems I could actually solve, challenges that responded to hard work and creativity rather than family dynamics that seemed immune to logic or fairness. Around noon, Jessica called my work phone, something she'd never done before. I hesitated before answering, knowing that any conversation with her would likely be difficult, but curiosity won out. "Maya, I need to talk to you." Her voice was small and uncertain, lacking the anger that had characterized our last interaction. "I'm at work, Jessica. Can this wait?" "No, it can't. I'm at the hospital." My stomach dropped. "What happened? Are you okay? Is the baby okay?" "The baby's fine. I'm fine. But Maya, I need you to come here. Please." "What hospital? Why are you there?" "Asu. I had some cramping this morning and got scared, so I came in for an ultrasound. Everything's normal, but..." Her voice trailed off. "But what?" "But Robert was supposed to meet me here, and he's not answering his phone. Ryan obviously won't come, and Mom is too angry to be supportive right now. You're the only family I have left." The desperation in Jessica's voice was something I'd never heard before, a vulnerability that cut through all the anger and resentment I'd been carrying. Despite everything that had happened between us, she was still my sister, and she was scared and alone in a hospital room. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, I said, already grabbing my purse and coat. "Maya? Thank you. I know I don't deserve this after everything I said to you yesterday. We'll talk when I get there." The drive to OHSU felt longer than usual, Portland traffic moving at its typical sluggish pace while my mind raced with possibilities. Was Jessica having complications with the pregnancy? Had something happened to Robert? Was this another manipulation designed to draw me back into her drama? I pushed the cynical thoughts away and focused on the fact that my sister had reached out to me when she was frightened, despite our recent confrontation. I found Jessica in the maternity ward waiting area, looking small and lost in an oversized sweatshirt and leggings. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wasn't wearing any makeup, which made her look younger and more fragile than I'd seen her in years. When she spotted me walking toward her, her face crumpled with relief. "Maya, I'm so glad you came." She stood up and hesitated, as if unsure whether I would welcome physical contact. I opened my arms and let her hug me, feeling how much weight she'd already lost despite being pregnant. "What did the doctor say?" I asked as we sat down together. "Everything's normal. The cramping was just my body adjusting, and the baby's heartbeat is strong." But Maya, when I was lying on that exam table alone, listening to the heartbeat, I realized how completely isolated I've become. "Where's Robert?" Jessica's face darkened. "That's what I need to talk to you about. Robert has been avoiding my calls since Ryan confronted me. When I told him about the hospital appointment, he said he couldn't risk being seen there in case someone recognized us together. He's protecting himself. He's protecting his family. There's a difference." I studied my sister's face, seeing the desperate need to believe that Robert's absence was noble rather than cowardly. "Jessica, do you hear yourself? You're in the hospital scared about your pregnancy, and the father of your baby won't come. Because it might be inconvenient for him. It's more complicated than that." "Is it?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Robert is perfectly happy to have an affair with you as long as it doesn't require any real sacrifice or commitment." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "You don't understand. Robert loves me, but he has to think about his children. If Sarah finds out about us before he's ready to tell her, it could make the custody situation much more difficult. The custody situation that doesn't exist yet because he hasn't told his wife about the affair. He's going to tell her. He just needs more time to figure out the right approach." I felt a familiar frustration building in my chest, the same feeling I'd experienced countless times over the years when Jessica refused to see obvious truths about her relationships. "How much time does he need?" "You're 12 weeks pregnant, Jessica. In 6 months, you're going to have his baby. When exactly is he planning to leave his wife?" "We haven't worked out all the details yet." "Have you worked out any details? Do you have a plan for where you'll live? How you'll support yourself and the baby? Whether Robert will pay child support?" Jessica's face went pale. "I hadn't really thought about the practical aspects yet." "You hadn't thought about how you're going to survive as a single mother?" "I won't be a single mother. Robert and I will be together." "When? After his divorce is finalized? After he's navigated custody arrangements? After he's paid his wife whatever settlement she demands?" "Jessica, you could be waiting years for Robert to be free to commit to you. You're being deliberately negative because you want me to give up on him." I took a deep breath and tried to speak more gently. "I'm being realistic because I care about you and I want you to make informed decisions about your future. My future is with Robert and our baby. Your future is with your baby, regardless of what Robert decides to do. That's the only thing you can count on right now." Jessica stood up abruptly and began pacing the small waiting area, her movements agitated and restless. "I can't do this alone, Maya. I can't be a single mother working at a yoga studio for $12 an hour. Then maybe it's time to think about other options." "What other options?" I hesitated, knowing that what I was about to suggest would likely cause another explosion of anger. "Have you considered whether you're ready to be a mother at all? You're 25, you're unemployed, you're about to be divorced, and the father of your baby is married to someone else. Are you suggesting I should have an abortion?" "I'm suggesting you should consider all of your options while you still have them." Jessica stopped pacing and stared at me with an expression of horror. "I can't believe you would even say that to me. I'm saying it because I love you and I want you to think clearly about what you're choosing. I'm choosing to have my baby, Robert's baby. The baby we created out of love. The baby you created during an affair while you were married to someone else. Why do you have to make everything sound so sordid?" "Because the truth is sordid, Jessica. The situation is messy and complicated and unfair to everyone involved, including the baby." Jessica sank back into her chair, her hands moving protectively to her stomach. "This baby is the only good thing to come out of this whole situation. I'm not going to let you make me feel guilty for wanting to keep it. I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. I'm trying to help you see that having a baby won't solve your problems with Robert or make him more likely to leave his wife. I'm not having the baby to trap Robert. I'm having it because I want to be a mother. Then be a mother. But be a mother who has a plan and a support system and realistic expectations about what your life is going to look like. We sat in silence for several minutes, watching other families in the waiting area deal with their own medical situations. A young couple held hands while waiting for test results, their wedding rings catching the fluorescent light. An older woman sat alone, periodically checking her phone for updates from someone who wasn't there. Maya, Jessica said finally, her voice small and uncertain. Will you help me figure out a plan? What kind of plan? A real plan. For how I'm going to support myself and the baby. For what I'm going to do if Robert doesn't leave Sarah. For how I'm going to rebuild my life after destroying my marriage. I felt something ease in my chest, a small relief that Jessica was finally acknowledging the reality of her situation. Of course I'll help you. But I need you to be honest with me about everything. No more lies, no more secrets. I promise. And I need you to stop waiting for Robert to rescue you. Whatever plan we make has to be based on you taking care of yourself and your baby, with or without him. Jessica nodded slowly. I think I'm starting to realize that Robert might not be the man I thought he was. What do you mean? I mean the Robert the first fell in love with was passionate and romantic and willing to risk everything for our relationship. But the Robert who won't come to the hospital with me because someone might see us together, that's not the same person. People show you who they really are when the stakes get high. And Robert is showing me that his comfort and security are more important than supporting me through this pregnancy. I reached over and took Jessica's hand, feeling how cold her fingers were. I'm sorry that you're learning this about him now, when you need his support the most. I'm sorry I've been so angry with you. You were trying to protect me from getting hurt even worse later on. I was trying to protect everyone from getting hurt worse. But mostly, I was trying to do what felt right. Jessica squeezed my hand. Can we start over? Can we try to rebuild our relationship on honesty instead of all the secrets and lies I've been living with? I'd like that. But Jessica, it means you have to stop expecting me to cover for your mistakes or clean up your messes. I'll support you, but I won't enable destructive behavior. I understand. I think I'm ready to start taking responsibility for my own choices. A nurse appeared in the waiting area and called Jessica's name for her follow-up appointment. As we stood up together, Jessica turned to me with an expression that was equal parts fear and determination. Maya, will you come into the appointment with me? I don't want to hear the baby's heartbeat alone again. Of course. The examination room was small and sterile, with motivational posters about prenatal care covering the walls. Jessica changed into a hospital gown while I sat in the corner chair, and when the doctor came in with the ultrasound equipment, I moved closer to Jessica's bedside. Everything looks perfect, Dr. Martinez said as she moved the ultrasound wand over Jessica's belly. Baby's measuring right on schedule, heartbeat is strong and steady. The sound of the heartbeat filled the room, fast and rhythmic and undeniably alive. Jessica's eyes filled with tears as she listened, and I felt an unexpected surge of protectiveness toward both my sister and the tiny life growing inside her. Would you like to know the sex? Dr. Martinez asked. Jessica looked at me questioningly. What do you think? It's your choice, I said. But I think knowledge is usually better than uncertainty. Okay. Yes, I'd like to know. Congratulations. It's a girl. Jessica's sob was audible, and she reached for my hand without looking away from the ultrasound screen. A daughter, she whispered. I'm going to have a daughter. Do you have any questions about the pregnancy or about what to expect over the next few months? Dr. Martinez asked. I have a lot of questions, Jessica said. But mostly about things that aren't medical. Well, I'm here for the medical questions whenever you need me. And Jessica, I want you to know that whatever your personal situation looks like, you have options and support available. Don't hesitate to reach out if you need resources or referrals. After we left the hospital, Jessica and I sat in my car. In the parking garage, both of us processing what we'd just experienced. The ultrasound photos lay on the dashboard between us, tiny black and white images of Jessica's daughter. I can't believe I'm going to be a mother in 6 months, Jessica said. How does that feel? Terrifying. Exciting. Overwhelming. She picked up one of the ultrasound photos and studied it carefully. Maya, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. Do you think I'm going to be a good mother? I considered the question carefully, thinking about all the ways Jessica had struggled with responsibility and commitment over the years, but also remembering her capacity for love and joy. I think you have the potential to be a wonderful mother, I said finally. But it's going to require you to grow up in ways you haven't had to before. What do you mean? I mean you're going to have to put someone else's needs before your own, every single day, for the rest of your life. You're going to have to make decisions based on what's best for your daughter, not what's most exciting or romantic for you. Jessica nodded slowly. I'm scared that I don't know how to do that. Nobody knows how to do that before they become a parent. But Jessica, you have 6 months to figure out how to build a stable, healthy life for yourself and your baby. That's where we start. Where do we start exactly? I pulled out my phone and opened a note-taking app. We start with the practical stuff. Housing, income, health insurance, childcare options. Then we figure out what kind of relationship, if any, you want Robert to have with his daughter. You think I should tell him the sex? I think you should decide what kind of father you want him to be before you share any more information with him. If he's not willing to step up and be present for the important moments now, what makes you think he'll be there for midnight feedings and diaper changes? Jessica was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the Portland skyline through the parking garage windows. You know what the worst part is, she said finally. What? I think I've been in love with the idea of Robert more than the actual person. The Robert in my head was brave and romantic and willing to sacrifice everything for our love. The real Robert is scared and selfish and not ready to give up his comfortable life. It takes courage to admit that. I feel like such a fool. I destroyed my marriage for someone who won't even come to a doctor's appointment with me. You made a mistake. A big, complicated, hurtful mistake. But Jessica, you're 25 years old and you're about to become a mother. This is your chance to learn from the mistake and build something better. Will you help me? Really help me, not just clean up my messes but actually help me become the kind of person who can be a good mother? I looked at my sister, this woman who had caused so much pain and chaos over the past few months, and saw something I hadn't seen in years, genuine humility and a willingness to change. Yes, I said. I'll help you. But we do this the right way, with honesty and accountability and realistic expectations. Thank you, Maya, for everything. For telling Ryan the truth, for coming to the hospital today, for not giving up on me even when I was horrible to you. You're my sister. I'm never going to give up on you. But I'm also never going to enable your destructive choices again. I understand. And Maya? I'm going to need to tell Robert that I don't want to see him anymore. That he needs to decide whether he wants to be a father to his daughter or not, but he can't keep stringing me along while he figures out his marriage. How do you feel about that? Terrified. But also relieved. I'm tired of waiting for someone else to determine my future. Good. That's the first step toward building the life you actually want instead of the life you think you're supposed to want. As we drove back toward downtown Portland, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, hope for my relationship with Jessica and respect for the woman she was trying to become. The road ahead would be difficult and complicated, full of challenges neither of us could fully anticipate. But for the first time since discovering her affair, I believed that Jessica was ready to face those challenges honestly. My phone buzzed with a text from David. How did everything go at the hospital? Thinking about you both. I showed the message to Jessica, who smiled for the first time all day. He seems like a good guy, she said. He is a good guy. Are you going to ask him out? Maybe. After I help my sister figure out how to build a stable life for herself and her daughter. Maya, you don't have to put your own happiness on hold for me anymore. I think it's time for both of us to learn how to take care of ourselves. You're right. But I also think it's time for both of us to learn the difference between healthy support and enabling dysfunction. What's the difference? Healthy support helps you become stronger and more independent. Enabling dysfunction makes it easier for you to avoid consequences and stay stuck in harmful patterns. And you think you've been enabling me? I think we've both been enabling each other in different ways. You by expecting me to fix your problems, and me by always stepping in to do exactly that. Jessica was quiet for the rest of the drive, processing our conversation and probably beginning to understand how much her life was about to change. When I dropped her off at our mother's house in Beaverton, she hugged me tightly. I love you, Maya. And I'm sorry for all the pain I've caused. I love you too. And Jessica? Tomorrow we start working on that plan we talked about. Tomorrow, she agreed. Driving back to my apartment, I felt exhausted but also oddly energized. The conversation with Jessica had been difficult but necessary, and for the first time in months, I felt like we were moving toward a healthier dynamic. My phone rang just as I was pulling into my parking garage, David's name appearing on the screen. Hey, I answered. Perfect timing. How are you feeling after today? Tired, but hopeful. Jessica and I had our first really honest conversation in years. That sounds like progress. It is. David, do you want to come over for dinner? I'll cook, and I promise not to spend the entire evening talking about family drama. I would. Love that. Should I bring wine? Definitely bring wine. Today has been the kind of day that requires good wine and even better company. I'll be there in an hour. As I hung up the phone and walked toward my apartment building, I realized that while my family was still fractured and Jessica's future remained uncertain, I was beginning to build something new and healthy in my own life. Relationships based on honesty rather than obligation, choices made from strength rather than fear, and connections with people who valued integrity over convenience. The hardest part was behind us. Everything that came next would be about healing and rebuilding, and for the first time in months, I believed that both Jessica and I were strong enough to do the work that healing required. 3 weeks had passed since Jessica and I had attended the ultrasound appointment together, and the changes in both our lives had been swift and dramatic. Jessica had moved out of our mother's house and into a small studio apartment in southeast Portland, funded by the money she'd been saving for a honeymoon trip with Ryan that would never happen. She'd also started working additional hours at the yoga studio and had begun teaching private lessons to supplement her income. I was settling into my new role as senior coordinator at the agency, managing a team of 3 people including David, whose design work had already elevated 2 major campaigns beyond client expectations. The promotion had come with a substantial salary increase and the kind of creative freedom I'd been craving for years. More importantly, it had given me a sense of purpose and accomplishment that wasn't tied to managing other people's problems. The morning everything came to a head started like any other Tuesday. I was reviewing campaign proposals in my new office when Amanda knocked on my door, her expression unusually serious. "Maya, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent and won't leave until she talks to you." Through my office window, I could see a woman I didn't recognize standing in our reception area. She was tall and athletic with short auburn hair and was holding a manila envelope in her hands. Something about her posture suggested barely controlled anger. "Did she give you a name?" "Sarah Harrison." My stomach dropped. Robert's wife had somehow tracked me down at work, which meant she'd discovered the affair and knew about my role in exposing Jessica's secret. I took a deep breath and walked out to meet her, aware that several of my coworkers were watching the interaction with curiosity. "Mrs. Harrison, I'm Maya Thompson. How can I help you?" Sarah's eyes were red-rimmed but fierce, and when she looked at me, I could see the kind of pain that comes from having your entire world shattered. "You can help me by explaining why you knew my husband was having an affair and didn't tell me about it. I think we should talk privately. Would you like to come into my office?" "I would prefer to have this conversation somewhere your coworkers can't overhear it." We walked to a small conference room at the back of the agency, and I closed the door behind us. Sarah set the manila envelope on the table and crossed her arms, studying my face with the intensity of someone trying to solve a puzzle. "My husband confessed everything to me last night," she said without preamble. "The affair, the pregnancy, the lies he's been telling for months. But what I can't understand is how my children's lives are being destroyed because adults couldn't have honest conversations with each other. Mrs. Harrison, I'm truly sorry for what you're going through. I can't imagine how painful this must be. Can't you? Because from what Robert tells me, you discovered the affair weeks ago and chose to expose your own sister's marriage instead of contacting me directly." I felt a familiar twist of guilt in my stomach. "I told Ryan because he deserved to know the truth about his marriage. I didn't feel it was my place to interfere in your marriage. So you felt comfortable destroying one marriage but not warning another wife that her husband was cheating?" "I felt comfortable telling someone the truth about their own life. I didn't feel comfortable inserting myself into a situation I didn't fully understand." Sarah laughed, but it was a bitter sound with no humor in it. "You didn't understand the situation? Let me help you understand it now." She opened the manila envelope and spread several photographs across the conference table. They were pictures of Robert with Jessica at various locations around Portland, restaurants, hotels, parks where they'd met for their secret encounters. The images were clearly taken with a telephoto lens by someone who had been following them. "I hired a private investigator 6 weeks ago," Sarah said, watching my reaction to the photographs. "I knew something was wrong when Robert started working late every night and stopped being affectionate with me and the kids. The investigator gave me these photos 2 weeks ago, but I wanted to confront Robert with irrefutable evidence before I made any decisions about our marriage." "Why are you showing me these?" "Because I want you to see what adults should do when they discover something that affects multiple families. They gather information, they think through the consequences, and they handle the situation with care for everyone involved." I studied the photographs, seeing my sister and Robert together in moments that looked intimate and romantic. Jessica was glowing in several of the images, clearly happy and in love, while Robert appeared more cautious, always checking his surroundings. "Mrs. Harrison, I'm not sure what you want me to say. I made the best decision I could with the information I had." "Did you?" Because your decision to expose Jessica's affair in the most dramatic way possible has created a situation where my children are now dealing with their father's public humiliation on top of our divorce. I didn't make Robert's choices public. I told one person the truth about his own marriage. And you didn't think that person might react emotionally? You didn't consider that your brother-in-law might confront Jessica in a way that would escalate the situation? I felt defensive, anger rising in my chest. Ryan had every right to react emotionally. He'd been deceived for months. Of course he did. But Maya, when you decided to blow up Jessica's life, you also blew up mine and my children's lives. My 8-year-old son is asking me why Daddy doesn't live with us anymore. My 10-year-old daughter overheard me crying on the phone with my sister and thinks it's her fault that our family is falling apart. The weight of Sarah's words hit me like a physical blow. In my focus on protecting Ryan and holding Jessica accountable, I hadn't fully considered the collateral damage my revelation would cause. Sarah's children were innocent victims of their father's choices, but they were also victims of the way those choices had been exposed. I never intended for your children to be hurt, I said quietly. But they are hurt. They're devastated and confused and angry, and there's nothing I can do to protect them from the consequences of adult decisions they had no part in making. What would you have wanted me to do differently? Sarah gathered the photographs back into the envelope, her movements precise and controlled. I would have wanted you to find a way to contact me discreetly. To give me the information I needed to make informed decisions about how to handle the situation with my children's well-being in mind. And then what? You would have confronted Robert privately while Jessica continued lying to Ryan? I would have given Robert an ultimatum. End the affair immediately and commit to marriage counseling, or I would file for divorce and ensure that Jessica's husband knew about the relationship. You think Robert would have chosen your marriage over Jessica? I think Robert is a weak man who chose the path of least resistance. If I had made it clear that continuing the affair would cost him his children and half his assets, he might have made different choices. I sat back in my chair, processing Sarah's perspective and feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the certainty I'd felt about my own actions. Do you think I was wrong to tell Ryan the truth? I think you were wrong to tell him the truth in a way that guaranteed maximum chaos and minimum protection for the innocent people involved. But Ryan deserved to know. Ryan deserved to know, and I deserved to know, and both of us deserved the opportunity to handle our marriages with dignity and careful consideration for our children. Jessica doesn't have children. No, but she's pregnant with my husband's child, which means she's about to become part of my children's lives whether any of us want that or not. The full complexity of the situation hit me with sudden clarity. In 6 months, Jessica would give birth to a daughter who would be half-sister to Sarah's children. Robert would be connected to both families forever, regardless of which relationships survived and which ones ended. The way this situation had been handled would affect not just the current adults involved, but the children who would grow up dealing with the aftermath. Mrs. Harrison, I'm genuinely sorry that my actions contributed to making this situation more painful for your family. I don't want your apology, Maya. I want you to understand that moral absolutes are a luxury that people without children can afford. When you have kids depending on you, you learn to think strategically about how to minimize harm while still addressing problems. What happens now? Now I'm divorcing my husband, and I'm moving my children to Seattle to be closer to my parents while we adjust to being a single-parent family. Robert will have visitation rights, but he'll also have to explain to his children why he destroyed our family for a woman who's barely older than some of his college students. And the baby? The baby will be Robert's responsibility to figure out. He'll pay child support, obviously, but beyond that, I don't want any involvement with Jessica or her child. My children have been through enough trauma without having to navigate a relationship with their father's affair partner and half-sister. Sarah stood up and walked toward the conference room door, then turned back to face me one final time. Maya, I understand that you were trying to do the right thing. But sometimes the right thing requires more nuance and strategy than just blurting out the truth and hoping everyone else deals with the consequences. After she left, I sat alone in the conference room for a long time, staring at the table where the photographs had been spread out. Sarah's words had forced me to confront aspects of the situation I'd been avoiding. My revelation to Ryan had been morally correct but tactically naive. I'd been so focused on the principle of truth-telling that I hadn't considered whether there were better ways to achieve the same outcome with less collateral damage. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Robert's moving to Seattle to be closer to his kids after the divorce. He wants to be involved with our daughter, but he's not ready for a relationship with me. I think I'm actually relieved. I typed back, how are you feeling about that? Sad but not surprised. You were right about him not being the man I thought he was. But Maya, I think this might be better for everyone. The baby will have a father who's present but not conflicted about where his loyalties lie. Are you okay with raising her mostly on your own? I'm terrified, but I'm also excited. I get to make all the decisions about how she's raised without having to navigate Robert's guilt or his ex-wife's anger. What about money? He's going to pay child support, and I'm building my client base for private yoga instruction. I'll probably need some help occasionally, but I think I can make it work. I'm proud of you for handling this so maturely. I'm learning. Slowly, but I'm learning. David knocked on the conference room door and peeked his head inside. Everything okay? Amanda said you had an intense meeting with someone. Come in and close the door. I need to tell you about something. I explained about Sarah's visit and her perspective on how I'd handled the situation with Jessica's affair. David listened carefully, asking thoughtful questions and helping me process the complexity of Sarah's critique. Do you think she was right? I asked when I finished explaining. I think she was right that there might have been better ways to handle the situation. But Maya, you made decisions based on the information you had and the principles you believe in. You can't go back and change how things unfolded. But I can learn from it. What do you think you've learned? I thought carefully about his question, trying to identify the key insights from the past month of family drama. I've learned that being right isn't always the same as being helpful. I was right that Ryan deserved to know the truth, but I could have been more strategic about how I revealed it. What else? I've learned that my family dynamics were more complicated than I wanted to admit. I was so focused on being the responsible one that I never questioned whether my version of responsibility was actually healthy for anyone involved. And how do you feel about your relationship with Jessica now? Different. Better in some ways, more honest. But also more distant. I think we're both figuring out how to be sisters without me being her caretaker or her being my project to fix. That sounds like growth for both of you. David was right, but the growth had come at a significant cost. My relationship with my mother was still strained, possibly permanently damaged. Sarah's children were dealing with trauma that might have been minimized with better handling. And I was learning to live with the reality that good intentions and moral clarity weren't always sufficient guides for navigating complex human situations. My phone rang with a call from Ryan, something that hadn't happened since the day I'd told him about Jessica's affair. I answered cautiously, unsure what he might want to discuss. Maya, I hope it's okay that I'm calling you at work. I wanted to give you an update about the divorce proceedings. Of course. How are things going? Complicated but civil. Jessica and I are using a mediator instead of lawyers, which is helping keep things relatively amicable. She's not asking for alimony since the marriage was so short and the infidelity is documented. That's good of her. She's actually been surprisingly reasonable about everything. I think she feels guilty about how everything happened. How are you doing with all of this? Better than I expected, honestly. I'm sad about the end of the marriage, but I'm also relieved to be out of a relationship that was built on lies. And Maya, I wanted to thank you again for telling me the truth. Ryan, I've been thinking a lot about how I handled the situation, and I'm not sure I did it in the best way possible. What do you mean? I mean, I told you the truth, which was right, but I didn't think through all the consequences for everyone involved. Sarah Harrison came to see me today, and she helped me understand that my approach caused unnecessary pain for her children. Maya, you're not responsible for Robert's choices or for how his family deals with the consequences. You told me something I needed to know, and you did it because you cared about me. I appreciate that, but I think I could have handled it with more wisdom and less drama. Maybe. But you know what? I'm grateful that someone in your family valued my dignity enough to tell me the truth. Even if the delivery wasn't perfect, the intention was honorable. After we hung up, I realized that Ryan's perspective represented one side of a complex situation with multiple valid viewpoints. He was grateful for the truth regardless of how it was delivered. Sarah was angry about the lack of strategic thinking in how the truth was revealed. Jessica was learning to take responsibility for her choices. And I was discovering that moral decision-making was more nuanced than I'd previously understood. David and I worked late that evening, finalizing presentations for the Henderson Group campaign. As we packed up our materials around 8 o'clock, he looked at me with an expression that was both careful and hopeful. Maya, can I ask you something personal? Of course. With everything that's been happening with your family, how are you feeling about the possibility of dating someone? I felt my heart rate pick up slightly. Are you asking hypothetically or specifically? I'm asking specifically. About us. David, I've been hoping you would ask that question for weeks. Really? Even with everything else going on in your life? Especially with everything else going on. You've been the most stable, supportive presence I've had during all of this chaos. I didn't want to complicate your life further by adding Romantic pressure to an already stressful situation. You wouldn't be complicating my life. You'd be adding something positive to it. David smiled, and I realized that this moment, standing in our quiet office building with someone who valued both honesty and kindness, felt like the beginning of something healthy and genuine. Would you like to have dinner with me this weekend? Somewhere nice, where we can focus on us instead of family drama or work projects. I would love that. Good. Because I've been wanting to kiss you for about 3 months, and I figure it's time to see if you're interested in that, too. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. I'm definitely interested in that. When David kissed me in the empty office building, with Portland's city lights twinkling through the windows, it felt like stepping into a different version of my life. One where relationships were built on mutual respect and honest communication, where problems were solved through partnership rather than enabling, and where moral complexity was acknowledged rather than ignored. The past month had cost me the relationship I'd had with my mother and forever changed my dynamic with Jessica. But it had also taught me the difference between being responsible to the people I loved and being responsible for their choices. It had shown me that truth-telling required wisdom as well as courage, and that protecting people sometimes meant letting them face the consequences of their actions. Most importantly, it had revealed that the version of myself I'd been for 28 years, the caretaker, the fixer, the responsible one, wasn't the only version available to me. I could be someone who offered support without sacrificing her own boundaries, who valued honesty without ignoring complexity, and who built relationships based on authenticity rather than obligation. Jessica's daughter would be born in 5 months to a mother who was learning to take responsibility for her own life and a father who would navigate his parental duties from a distance. Sarah's children would adjust to their new reality with the support of extended family and professional counseling. Ryan would rebuild his life with the knowledge that he deserved relationships based on truth and mutual respect. And I would continue, learning to balance moral clarity with strategic wisdom, to offer love without enabling dysfunction, and to build a life that reflected my values without requiring perfection from myself or others. 3 weeks later, I received a card in the mail from Sarah Harrison. Inside was a brief note: Maya, I wanted you to know that we're settling into our new life in Seattle, and my children are doing better than I expected. While I still believe there were better ways to handle the situation, I'm grateful that the truth came out before more damage was done. Sometimes the right outcome happens even when the process is imperfect. Wishing you well, Sarah. I kept the card on my desk as a reminder that moral complexity doesn't negate moral responsibility, and that sometimes the best we can do is act with good intentions and learn from the consequences. The story of Jessica's affair and its aftermath would continue to unfold in ways none of us could predict, but I was finally at peace with the role I'd played in bringing the truth to light. The champagne glass that had shattered on my living room floor 6 weeks earlier had been swept away and forgotten, but the moment it represented, the end of my willingness to protect lies for the sake of family harmony, had become the foundation for a different kind of life. One where truth was valued over comfort, where growth was prioritized over stability, and where love was demonstrated through honest accountability rather than unconditional enabling. As I looked ahead to building a relationship with David, supporting Jessica through her journey into motherhood, and continuing to grow in my career, I carried with me the hard-won knowledge that doing the right thing was rarely simple, but it was always worth the complexity it required. 6 months later, I stood in the maternity ward of Portland General Hospital, holding my 3-day-old niece while Jessica slept in the recovery bed beside me. Baby Elena had her father's dark hair and Jessica's delicate features, and she was absolutely perfect despite the complicated circumstances of her birth. Robert had driven down from Seattle to meet his daughter, spending 2 awkward hours in the hospital room before returning to his new life and his other children. Elena Rose Thompson had been born on a Tuesday morning after 12 hours of labor, with me serving as Jessica's birth coach since Robert couldn't risk being present for the delivery. I'd held Jessica's hand through contractions, helped her breathe through the pain, and been the first person besides the medical team to hold Elena when she entered the world. The experience had been simultaneously exhausting and transformative, watching my sister become a mother and feeling the weight of this tiny life that would forever change our family dynamics. Jessica had surprised everyone with her strength during pregnancy and childbirth. She'd attended every prenatal appointment, taken birthing classes, read parenting books, and prepared for single motherhood with a determination I'd never seen from her before. The studio apartment she'd moved into after leaving our mother's house had been transformed into a cozy nursery space, with hand-painted walls and carefully chosen furniture that reflected both her artistic sensibilities and her newly practical mindset. The relationship between Jessica and our mother had slowly begun to heal over the months leading up to Elena's birth. Linda had initially been devastated by the divorce and the circumstances surrounding Jessica's pregnancy, but the prospect of becoming a grandmother had eventually overcome her anger and disappointment. She'd started visiting Jessica's apartment weekly, bringing homemade meals and helping with baby preparations, though their interactions remained somewhat formal and careful. David and I had been dating for 5 months, and our relationship had developed into something deep and sustainable. That felt completely different from any romantic connection I'd experienced before. He'd been patient during the difficult weeks following my confrontation with Sarah Harrison, supportive during Jessica's pregnancy complications, and enthusiastic about becoming an uncle figure to Elena. More importantly, he'd helped me navigate the complex emotions that came with rebuilding family relationships while maintaining healthy boundaries. My career had flourished under the new responsibilities of senior coordinator. The Henderson Group campaign had exceeded all expectations, leading to 3 additional high-profile accounts and recognition within Portland's marketing community. I'd hired 2 talented junior coordinators and was beginning to consider starting my own agency within the next few years. The professional success felt particularly meaningful because it was entirely separate from family drama and built on my own skills and hard work. Ryan had moved on with remarkable grace, selling the house he'd shared with Jessica and relocating to a downtown condominium that better suited his bachelor lifestyle. He'd started dating a colleague from his investment firm, a woman named Catherine who seemed genuinely interested in him rather than what he could provide for her. When I'd run into them at a coffee shop the month before, Ryan had looked happier and more relaxed than I'd seen him during his entire marriage to Jessica. The divorce proceedings had been finalized quickly and amicably, with Jessica waiving any claim to spousal support in exchange for Ryan not pursuing damages related to the affair. They'd maintained minimal but civil contact throughout Jessica's pregnancy, primarily for practical matters like health insurance and legal documentation. Ryan had sent a beautiful flower arrangement to the hospital when Elena was born, along with a card wishing Jessica well in motherhood. Robert's presence in our lives remained complicated and somewhat peripheral. He'd established a formal child support arrangement and had committed to monthly visits to Portland, but his relationship with Jessica had ended definitively. She'd realized during pregnancy that her romantic feelings for him had been based more on fantasy than reality, and that trying to maintain a relationship would be unfair to everyone involved, including Elena. The most challenging aspect of the situation remained Sarah Harrison's understandable anger toward our family. She'd moved her children to Seattle as planned and had made it clear that she wanted no contact with Jessica or Elena. This meant that Elena would grow up knowing she had 2 half-siblings but being unable to develop relationships with them, at least until they were old enough to make their own decisions about contact. I'd spent considerable time in therapy over the past 6 months, working through the guilt I felt about my role in the family's implosion and learning to accept that moral complexity didn't negate moral responsibility. My therapist, Dr. Martinez, had helped me understand that my choice to reveal Jessica's affair had been ethically sound even if strategically imperfect, and that I couldn't control how other people responded to difficult truths. The sessions had also helped me recognize patterns in my family relationships that went back to childhood. I'd been functioning as Jessica's caretaker and our family's emotional manager since our parents' divorce, taking on responsibilities that weren't developmentally appropriate and never learning to prioritize my own needs. Breaking those patterns had been painful but necessary for building healthier adult relationships. Jessica stirred in her hospital bed and opened her eyes, immediately looking toward where I sat with Elena. How long was I asleep? About 2 hours. Elena's been perfect, just looking around and occasionally making those tiny baby sounds that are somehow the most beautiful noise in the world. Jessica smiled and carefully repositioned herself to accept Elena back into her arms. I can't believe she's really here. I can't believe I'm actually a mother. How does it feel? Terrifying. And amazing and overwhelming. Like everything I thought I knew about love was just practice for this feeling. I watched Jessica study Elena's face with the intense focus that new mothers seem to develop instinctively. The transformation in my sister over the past months had been remarkable. The dramatic, impulsive woman who'd announced her pregnancy at my birthday party had evolved into someone thoughtful and purposeful, someone capable of putting another person's needs consistently before her own. Maya, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Always. Do you think I'm going to be able to do this? Raise her properly, give her what she needs, be the kind of mother she deserves? I considered her question carefully, thinking about all the ways Jessica had grown and changed since discovering she was pregnant. I think you're already being the kind of mother she deserves. You've made difficult decisions about what's best for her, you've prepared thoroughly for her care, and you're asking the right questions about how to be better. What if I make mistakes? What if I mess up her life the way I messed up mine? Jessica, every parent makes mistakes. The difference between good parents and bad parents isn't whether they make mistakes, it's whether they learn from them and prioritize their child's well-being over their own comfort. I'm scared that I don't know how to put someone else first. Consistently. You've been putting Elena first for months. You ended your relationship with Robert because it wasn't healthy for her. You moved to a smaller apartment so you could afford childcare. You've changed your entire lifestyle to prepare for motherhood. That's what putting someone else first looks like. Jessica was quiet for several minutes, gently stroking Elena's tiny hand. Maya, I also want to apologize to you for something I've never properly acknowledged. What's that? I'm sorry for expecting you to manage my emotions and fix my problems for so many years. I'm sorry for taking advantage of your sense of responsibility and for resenting you when you finally set boundaries. Her apology was unexpected and deeply meaningful. Thank you for saying that. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge how our dynamic worked. I didn't realize how much pressure I was putting on you until I had to start solving my own problems. Being responsible for yourself is actually much harder than I thought. But also more empowering, right? Yes. Scary but empowering. I like knowing that my successes are really mine, even if it means my failures are too. David arrived at the hospital that evening with dinner from our favorite Thai restaurant and a small stuffed elephant for Elena. He'd been incredibly supportive throughout Jessica's pregnancy, attending doctor's appointments when she needed extra support and helping with practical preparations like assembling baby furniture. His genuine excitement about Elena's arrival had touched both Jessica and me. How are our girls doing? He asked, kissing my forehead and then admiring Elena in Jessica's arms. Tired but happy, Jessica replied. Maya's been amazing. I couldn't have done any of this without her. She's pretty special, David agreed, settling into the chair beside my hospital bed. How was Robert's visit? Awkward but necessary, I answered. He held Elena for a while and seemed genuinely moved by meeting her, but it was clear that he's compartmentalizing this part of his life from his family in Seattle. Is Jessica okay with that arrangement? Jessica answered for herself. I'm more than okay with it. Robert is Elena's biological father, and I want her to know him, but I don't want the complications that would come with trying to blend our lives more significantly. That seems like a mature perspective. I'm learning that mature perspectives are usually the ones that acknowledge complexity rather than trying to simplify it. Dr. Williams stopped by during evening rounds to check on both Jessica and Elena. All the medical indicators were positive, and she cleared them for discharge the following morning. As she was leaving, she turned back to Jessica with a smile. You know, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I can usually tell which new mothers are going to struggle with the transition and which ones are going to thrive. You have all the signs of someone who's going to be excellent at this. What signs? You ask thoughtful questions, you've prepared thoroughly, you have realistic expectations about the challenges ahead, and you have a strong support system. Those are the factors that matter most for successful parenting. After Dr. Williams left, Jessica looked at me with tears in her eyes. Did you hear that? A professional thinks I might actually be good at this. I never doubted it. The Jessica who planned elaborate birthday parties and remembered everyone's favorite foods and made people feel special just by paying attention to them was always going to be a wonderful mother. You just needed to grow into the responsibility that comes with caring for someone completely dependent on you. I feel like I finally understand what love is supposed to look like. Not the dramatic, obsessive thing I thought I had with Robert, but this steady, protective feeling that makes you want to be better than you've ever been before. That's exactly what love is supposed to look like. David and I stayed until visiting hours ended, then drove back to my apartment together. We'd been spending most nights at my place, and David had gradually moved enough belongings there that we were essentially living together, though we hadn't formally discussed the arrangement. How are you feeling about everything? David asked, as we settled onto my couch with glasses of wine. Exhausted but proud. Worried but hopeful. It's been an incredible day. Jessica really has changed, hasn't she? Completely. Sometimes I look at her and can barely recognize the person who announced her pregnancy at my birthday party 6 months ago. People can change when they're properly motivated. And when they're finally held accountable for their choices. Instead of being rescued from the consequences. David took my hand and traced patterns on my palm with his finger. Maya, I want to ask you something, and I want you to know there's no pressure attached to the question. That's a concerning way to start a question. How would you feel about moving in together officially? Not just gradually accumulating belongings at each other's places, but actually making a conscious decision to build a life together? I felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. How would you feel about that? I would feel like it was the natural next step for two people who've discovered they work well together in all the ways that matter. What ways are those? We communicate honestly even when it's difficult. We support each other without trying to fix each other's problems. We share similar values about relationships and responsibility. And we make each other laugh even during stressful situations. Those are pretty good qualifications for moving in together. I think so. But Maya, I also want you to know that I understand this has been an intense year for you, and if you need more time to focus on your family and your career, I'm not going anywhere. I leaned against his shoulder and thought about his question. The past 6 months had been emotionally exhausting but also clarifying. I'd learned to distinguish between healthy support and enabling dysfunction, between moral clarity and strategic wisdom, between love and obligation. Most importantly, I'd discovered that I could maintain close family relationships without sacrificing my own needs and boundaries. David, I would love to move in with you officially. But I have one condition. What's that? I want us to talk through how we'll handle family obligations and support systems. I've spent years prioritizing other people's needs over my own. And I want to make sure we're building a partnership where we support each other first and extend support to others from a position of strength. That sounds like exactly the kind of healthy dynamic I want to build with you. Good. Because I think we're going to be dealing with Jessica and Elena's needs for a long time, and I want to make sure we're approaching that support as a team. Are you worried about Jessica becoming too dependent on you again? I'm worried about falling back into old patterns where I take responsibility for managing her emotions and solving her problems. But I'm also confident that the work I've done in therapy has prepared me to maintain better boundaries. And I'll help you maintain those boundaries if you start slipping back into caretaker mode. Promise? Promise. Maya, I love your loyalty to your family, but I also love the person you're becoming as you learn to prioritize your own well-being. I want to support both aspects of who you are. We spent the evening making plans for combining our living spaces and talking about the future we wanted to build together. David had started looking into the possibility of freelancing for other agencies in addition to his work at Bright Ideas, which would give him more flexibility and potentially higher income. I was seriously considering the possibility of starting my own marketing firm within the next 2 years, possibly with David as my primary creative partner. The conversation felt different from any relationship planning I'd done before. Instead of trying to fit my life around someone else's needs and expectations, we were figuring out how to blend our individual goals and values into something mutually supportive. It was collaborative rather than sacrificial, strategic rather than impulsive. My phone buzzed with a text from our mother. Elena is the most beautiful baby I've ever seen. Thank you for taking such good care of Jessica during this time. I know. I haven't always shown proper appreciation for everything you do for our family. I showed the message to David, feeling a mixture of gratitude and wariness about my mother's acknowledgement. How does that make you feel? David asked. Appreciated but cautious. I'm glad she recognizes the support I've provided, but I also want to make sure her appreciation doesn't turn into expectation that I'll continue managing everything. What would you say to her if you could be completely honest? I thought about his question carefully. I would say that I love our family and I want to support everyone, but I can't be the emotional manager and problem solver for everyone anymore. I would say that I need relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided caretaking. Would you actually say that to her? Maybe not in those exact words, but yes. I think I'm ready to have that conversation. I called my mother back and asked if she wanted to meet for coffee the next day. During our conversation, I planned to set clear expectations about my role in the family and my boundaries around support and involvement. It would be a difficult discussion, but I'd learned that difficult conversations were often necessary for building healthier relationships. The next morning, David and I picked up Jessica and Elena from the hospital and drove them home to the apartment Jessica had transformed into a welcoming space for new motherhood. We helped carry baby supplies upstairs and stayed long enough to ensure that Jessica felt confident about managing Elena's first day at home. Watching Jessica feed Elena and change her diaper with careful, practiced movements, I felt a deep sense of pride in my sister's transformation. She was calm and attentive, responding to Elena's needs with the kind of intuitive care that suggested she really had found her calling as a mother. The dramatic, self-centered woman who'd caused so much chaos 6 months earlier had evolved into someone capable of genuine selflessness. Maya, Jessica said as David and I prepared to leave, I want you to know that I understand you probably won't be available to help with Elena as much as you helped with my other problems over the years. What do you mean? I mean I understand that you have your own life to build with David, and I can't expect you to be my primary support system anymore. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I realize that part of becoming a good mother means learning to solve problems independently rather than relying on other people to manage my life. I'll always want to be involved with Elena and supportive of you as her mother. I know. But I also know that support looks different from fixing, and I want to learn the difference. What does that look like practically? It means I call you when I need advice or emotional support, not when I need you to solve problems for me. It means I ask for help with specific tasks rather than expecting you to manage my overall situation. And it means I take responsibility for the consequences of my own decisions instead of expecting you to protect me from them. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. Jessica, that's exactly what healthy support looks like. I'm learning. Slowly, but I'm learning. David and I drove back to my apartment in comfortable silence, both of us processing the emotional intensity of the past few days. As we pulled into my parking garage, I felt a sense of completion about the journey. That had started with Jessica's pregnancy announcement at my birthday party 6 months earlier. The champagne glass that had shattered on my living room floor that night had represented the end of my willingness to protect lies for the sake of family harmony. The months that followed had been difficult and painful, full of confrontations and revelations that had fundamentally changed our family dynamics. But they had also led to this moment, Jessica holding her daughter with confidence and maturity, David and I planning a future built on mutual respect and shared values, and me finally understanding the difference between love and obligation. Elena would grow up in a family that prioritized honesty over convenience, responsibility over enabling, and authentic relationships over comfortable lies. She would know her father despite the complicated circumstances of her conception, and she would be raised by a mother who had learned to put her child's needs above her own desires. Most importantly, she would be surrounded by adults who had done the difficult work of growing beyond their past mistakes. As I looked ahead to building a life with David, supporting Jessica in her journey as a mother, and continuing to grow in my career, I carried with me the hard-won knowledge that love sometimes requires difficult choices, that truth is more valuable than peace, and that the most meaningful relationships are built on foundations of honesty and mutual respect rather than obligation and convenience. The story that had begun with betrayal and deception had evolved into something redemptive and hopeful. Not because the pain had been erased or the mistakes forgotten, but because everyone involved had chosen to learn and grow rather than simply survive the consequences of poor choices. 6 months later, when Elena took her first steps in Jessica's apartment with David and me cheering her on, I realized that sometimes the best endings are actually new beginnings, opportunities to build something better and healthier from the lessons learned through difficult experiences. The family we'd created wasn't the one any of us had originally planned, but it was honest and supportive and full of people who had chosen to prioritize love over pride, growth over comfort, and authenticity over appearance. And that, I'd learned, was worth all the champagne glasses that had to shatter along the way. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.